Good morning, students. Let us resume our reading of Mina, or the text Mina by Eliza Haywood. In our last lecture, I was discussing about how Mina disclosed her identity, okay? And though it was an assumed identity that her name was Mina in front of Beauplessis. Now, let us begin with the text. The text begins in this way. They parted not till towards morning. So here the they are actually referring to Beauplessis and Mina. It says, they parted not till towards morning, and she obliged him to a willing vow of visiting her the next day at 3 in the afternoon. So far as I have discussed, we have found that there was a kind of a physical proximity in between Beauplessis and Mina at this moment, and now it was a kind of a nocturnal journey to some extent that is being made by these two. And here it mentioned that they parted not till towards morning, so it was actually indicating towards a kind of, you see, a physical assimilation. And then it says, and she obliged him to a willing vow of visiting her the next day at 3 in the afternoon. That means it will continue by the next day. It was too late for her to go home that night, therefore contented herself with lying there. In the morning she sent for the woman of the house to come up to her, and easily perceiving by her manner that she was a woman who might be influenced by gifts, made her a present of a couple of broad pieces. Broad piece is a kind of coins worth 20 shillings, you see, as £1, each a substantial sum for a prostitute, but not for a gentlewoman. So somehow you will find that Mina is creating a kind of a maze, you see, as you can find that the title, the alternative title of this particular text is Love in a Maze. So therefore you will find the maze here is being created by Mina. Why? Because she is deliberately showing Beauplessis that she was not an ordinary prostitute, rather she was of a person who was belonging to something else. Okay, it was her focus of concern here, and that's why she was showing her positions, showing her status to some extent. That means she was completely different from the other one. So that's why the woman who might be influenced by gifts made her a present of a couple of broad pieces, and desired her that if a gentleman who had been there the night before should ask any questions concerning her, that he should be told she was lately come out of the country. So somehow Mina was very intelligent. She was to some extent she was preparing for the situations, you see, that if Beauplessis arrives at any moment to the lady of the house, or maybe the attendant of the house, then ultimately what should be told to Beauplessis and what should not. So that's why here it says Mina gives her some present of a couple of broad pieces. That means some money has been vested on her, and desired her that if the gentleman who had been there the night before, that means it is indicating to Beauplessis, should ask any questions concerning her, that is Mina, that he should be told she was, that is Mina, was lately come out of the country. That means she is coming from the countryside, had lodged there about a fortnight, you see, that means 14 or 15 days, and that her name was Mina. And then she also added, I shall lie but seldom here. So it might be possible that we, that means I and or Beauplessis and me, lie here but seldom here, but not indeed. If I come but in those times when I expect to meet him. So it might be possible that in near future we will copulate here. I would therefore have you ordered so, that he may think I am but just gone out. If he should happen by any accident to call when I am not here. So it might be possible that Beauplessis will arrive at this place in my absence. It might be possible. So ultimately you have to make the situations or bring the situations under control, and that's why I am spending my money on you, right? An accident to so gone out, and if he should happen by any accident to call when I am not here. For I would not, for the world, have him imagine I do not constantly lodge here. So I don't want to make him feel that I do not constantly lodge here. The landlady assured her she would do everything as she desired, and gave her to understand she wanted not the gift of secrecy. Everything being ordered at this house or at this home for the security of her reputation. So ultimately, we'll find that Fantomina is spending a lot regarding the keeping her reputation secret and the security of her reputation. So everything she is doing. So that's why here it says that everything being ordered at this home for the security of her reputation. She repaired to the other, where she easily excused to an unsuspecting aunt, with whom she boarded. So ultimately, we'll find that somehow Eliza Haywood is referring to an aunt, okay, with whom Fantomina was actually residing in this particular town. And she was an unsuspecting aunt, you see, with whom she boarded. Her having been abroad all night, so she was out, and now saying she went with a gentleman and his lady in a barge to a little country seat. What is country seat? Country seat means country residence, obviously. Of theirs at the river, all of them designing to return the same evening. But that one of the bargemen happening to be taken ill on the sudden, and no other waterman to be got that night, they were obliged to tarry till morning. So it was a kind of a story that she was creating regarding her absence. You see, that ultimately we can find here that Eliza Haywood is not only referring to the form of sexuality. Obviously, ultimately, so far as the novel is concerned, you will find that the primary focus of this particular text is to represent some, the society. Obviously, it is the society that is the primary focus of this text. But ultimately, you will find that somehow it is not simply the society. Rather, it is actually referring to the differing conditions of sexuality, right? That means the female sexuality and the male sexuality. I have discussed it while I was discussing about the introduction of this particular text, and I will come to this later in detail. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to suggest here, you will find that the primary concern of Eliza A. Haywood, or the primary focus of Eliza A. Haywood here in this particular section, is to comment on the attributes or the temperament of this lady any longer. You see? So fundamentally, you will find here that the lady is residing completely alone in this town. Why I'm saying alone? Because there is no parents being present. Okay. But towards the end of the text, we will find that it was her mother. She will come, and ultimately she will give her punishments and so regarding her affairs and regarding her doings, and the result that comes. That will come to, I will discuss in later. But ultimately here you will find that somehow this lady, that means Fantomina, okay, obviously the name is not actual, but it was a fictional name to some extent that she is imposing upon her. So we will find here that Fantomina, she took opportunities, obviously. Okay, and there is an aunt, unsuspecting aunt, she was creating her story to make her believe that what she was telling was truth, okay, or was true any longer. So then it says that somehow there was a reference to the aunt, and it says, therefore, that she went with a gentleman and his lady in a barge, okay, to a little country seat, that is country house or residence. Of theirs at the river, all of them designing to return the same evening, so they prepared to return by evening. But what happens there? But that one of the bargemen happening to be taken ill. The bargeman was ill on a sudden, and no other waterman to be got that night. They were obliged to tarry till morning. Thus did this lady's wit and vivacity. That is the fundamental thing. You see, wit and vivacity. That is underscored here. So wit and vivacity assist her in all, but where it was most needful. She had discernment to foresee and avoid all those evils which might attend the loss of her reputation, but was wholly blind to those of the ruin of her virtue. Yes, she was always thoughtful regarding her reputation, but ultimately, each and every moment that her works, her deeds, that are actually ruining her virtue, actually ruining her position to some extent. And having managed her affairs so as to secure the one, give perfectly easy with the remembrance, she had forfeited the other. That means she was, to some extent, you will find that she was focusing on her reputation. She was focusing on the matter of secrecy. That means so that her affairs would remain secret to others. But ultimately, you will find that so far as the quote-unquote morality is concerned, so far as the quote-unquote virtue is concerned, you will find that she was completely unaware of the sleeping, you see, S-L-I-P-P-I-N-G, sleeping, the sleeping of her morality from her, sleeping of her virtue from her. So somehow you will find that the typical 18th century morality, the typical 18th century concept of virtue, all these things have been prefigured here in this particular line, in this particular expression. Eliza Haywood was not to be discussed about simply referring to the vulgar texts, you see. So each and everywhere in this particular text, there are ample provisions, ample references where you can find that Eliza Haywood is also focusing on the moralistic perspectives. She was with a particular kind of an interrogating morality, you see. That means the kind of morality, the kind of virtue that Philomena was losing each and every moment. That was also at the primary focus of this particular text. So it is not simply a vulgar text to describe the copulation between two persons or maybe three persons. Okay, rather you will find that somehow the text is also addressing the readers of the text regarding the concept of morality, the concept of virtue. She is always indicating that somehow the lady is to some extent subsided from the way of virtue, subsided from the way of, you see, morality, obviously. This moralistic question is always being in front, and we cannot negate that. So that's why she says, but was wholly blind to those of ruin of her virtue, and having managed her affairs so as to secure the one, grew perfectly easy with the remembrance. She had forfeited the other, that is the virtue. The virtue has been forfeited from her. The more she reflected on the merits of Beauplessis, the more she excused herself for what she had done. And the prospect of what continued bliss she expected to share with him took from her all remorse for having engaged in an affair which promised her so much satisfaction, and in which she found not the least danger of misfortune, because she was completely driven and derided by such kind of, physical association and such kind of, love that she was feeling at this moment. If he is really, she said to herself, the faithful, the constant lover you was sworn to be. These are the words that a male figure is actually disclosing in front of a lady. And she says to herself, that if he is really the faithful, the constant lover he has sworn to be, how charming will be our amour. This amour means love, the passionate love, obviously. And if he should be false, so the play must go in both ways. Either he will be a truthful personality, as he is describing himself, or maybe he should be false. Grow satiated, that means, it's the same kind of thing as you will find in Duke Orsino's speech to some extent. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me the excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. So what is the appetite? It is actually referring to passions. It is actually referring to the hunger for sexuality, obviously. That when the excess is being given, then it will find the satiety. When the excess will be given, then it will die, obviously. So somehow, here, Eliza Haywood is commenting on the patterns of male sexuality. Until it becomes excess, there was a kind of hunger, an urge, a passionate, movement of the limbs. But ultimately, when it comes to the excess, it becomes dead. Right? So that is the fundamental thing that she is trying to provoke here, or maybe indicate here. So here it says, if he really, the faithful, the constant lover he was sworn to be, how charming will be our amour. And if he should be false, grow satiated, like other men, I shall but at the worst have the private vexation to knowing I have lost him. The intrigue being a secret, my disgrace will be so too. So ultimately, it was a kind of a secret affair that was going on, and Phantomina was thinking that I am not disclosing my real identity. So it might not be possible that my original identity will come to the forefront. So it is not possible. So the private vexation of knowing I have lost him, the intrigue being a secret, my disgrace will be so too. So the disgrace will not come to the forefront though. She was thinking to some extent. She was evaluating her exposures and so. I shall hear no whispers as I pass. It's a kind of a self-justification, obviously. I shall hear no whispers as I pass. Okay, that means nobody will know about my real identity. Nobody will know about my affair or secret affair, how I have been duped by Vivacity. So literally no whispers will be heard by me when I was passing in throughout the country. So I shall hear no whispers as I pass. She's forsaken. The odious word forsaken, that means separated or forsaken by this man, Vivacity. So the odious word forsaken will never wound my ears because nobody will identify me that Phantomina is Lady X. Okay, so it can't be possible for them. The odious word forsaken will never wound my ears, nor will my wrongs excite either the mirth or pity of the talking world. It will not be even in the power of my undoer himself, that means Vivacity. Even Vivacity will not identify that whom he has duped. So that's why it says that it will not even the power of my undoer, that is Vivacity himself, to triumph over me. And while he laughs at and perhaps despises the fond, the yielding Phantomina, he will revere and esteem the virtuous, the reserved lady. So ultimately, when the occasion will pass, ultimately he will continually, he will consider me as a reserved lady from the upper strata of society. He cannot think that Phantomina and this lady are the one and the same person. In this manner, so it was a kind of a kind of judgment, as you see, that she was evaluating. Self-evaluation is going on regarding her activities. She is thinking about the dangers that are lurking behind her actions, what will come to the forefront and what will not, what will happen to her and what will not if she was duped by Vivacity. Then ultimately she has got resoluted. In this manner did she applaud her own conduct, that means what I have suggested myself. She was thinking, she was making applaud her. So in this manner did she applaud her own conduct and exult with the imagination that he had more prudence than all her sex beside. Why? Because there are ample provisions, as I have discussed when I was going with the introduction of this particular text, that there are ample provisions, there are ample references of the ladies who are completely dodged by their male lovers, obviously. And what happens? You will find that somehow there are the texts of tears, there are ample provisions of tears, sadness, melancholy. You will find that somehow the ladies are completely broken. But here you will find an alternative portrayal, an alternative portraiture of a female character who are altogether different from the other female characters who have been portrayed in the novels by the male authors, you see. So it was a kind of a patriarchal orientation. It's a patriarchal orientation to victory that had been given to the male part of the society. Whereas the females have been always being deprived of such kind of prowess, such kind of wisdom, and such kind of mental strength. That's why we will find always in the typical patriarchal texts that have been incorporated by the writers of this particular period, like Defoe and Richardson and Fielding. Okay, and you will find that the females are always in crying after her lover deserted her. But here she is thinking, you see, that in this manner did she applaud her own conduct, exult with the imagination that she had more prudence than all her sex beside. Okay, this was a kind of an indication towards an alternative form of females. Okay, that Eliza Haywood, that she is trying to focus here. Though ultimately you cannot negate that she was completely, that is Eliza Haywood, was completely, free from the patriarchal norms and regulations, and that's why the end of this text moves to the matter of punishment. Right? So that's what it says, in this manner did she applaud her own conduct and exult with the imagination that she had more prudence than all her sex beside. And it must be confessed, indeed, that she preserved an economy. It means a kind of a discretion in the management of this intrigue, beyond what almost any woman but herself ever did. In the first place, by making no person in the world a confidant in it. And in the next, in concealing from Beauplessis himself the knowledge who she was. So these were the things that she was doing at this moment. For though she met him 3 or 4 days in a week, at that lodging she had taken for that purpose, yet as much as he employed her time and thoughts, she was never missed from any assembly she had been accustomed to frequent. That means she was playing the role of both identities, you see. That she was not absent from the accustomed movement that being attached with this lady, and also she frequented the meeting with Beauplessis. That means both the identities and both the role playings have been continually being present at a time. The business of her love has engrossed her till 6 in the evening, and before 7 she has been dressed in a different habit or different outfit, and in another place slippers and nightgown loosely flowing has been the garb in which he has left the languishing Philomena, laced and adorned with all the blaze of jewels has he, in less than an hour after, beheld at the royal chapel, the palace gardens, drawing rooms, opera or play, the haughty, awe-inspiring lady. So these are the two selves, these are the two roles that she is playing continually. 1,000 times has he stood amazed. So you can find that Beauplessis comes in front of that lady. 1,000 times he stood amazed at the prodigious likeness. He can identify, or he could identify the similarities between the two characters. It must be there, but somehow he thought. 1,000 times has he stood amazed at the prodigious likeness, the similarity between his little mistress, that is Philomena, and this court beauty, that is the lady actually. But was still as far from imagining they were the same as he was the first hour he had accosted her in the playhouse. Though it is not impossible, but that her resemblance to the celebrated lady might keep his inclination alive something longer than otherwise they would have been. So why this particular lady is quite similar to that lady? Okay? And it creates a kind of the adventurous notion within him. So they would have been, and that it was to the thoughts of his, as he supposed, unenjoyed charmer, she owed in the great measure the vigor of his latter caresses. But he varied not so much from his sex as to be able to prolong desire, you see. That means it continued for some time, but ultimately, now Eliza Haywood is focusing on the patterns of male sexuality. That one time it will come, that when the excess will be there, and then it will be no more, it will be dead. And that's why he says that he varied not so much from his sex as to be able to prolong desire to any great length after possession. So when the possession comes, when he possesses that lady, okay, for infinite times, ultimately you will find that the desire will not be prolonged in her. So that's why she says, but he varied not so much from his sex as to be able to prolong desire to any great length after possession. The rifled charms of Phantomina soon lost their poignancy, okay, or intensity, and grew tasteless and insipid. And when the season of the year inviting the company to the Bath is a town, it's very famous. So far as the Restoration Committee of Manners are concerned, and Restoration texts are concerned, you will find that London and Bath, these are the two prominent towns that have been mentioned, which are obviously related to the fashions of the society, mentioned in these plays, in these texts, and it is no exception. Here also you can find a reference to Bath. So a particular time comes, a season of the year, inviting the company to the Bath. Okay, it is the resort town where people of fashion submerged, known for its medicinal waters and its social opportunities. She offered to accompany him. That means this lady, that is Phantomina. She offered to accompany Beauplaisir. He made an excuse to go without her, but ultimately it was dead, you see. Which was dead? The dead was the passion. The dead was longing. The longing was dead, obviously. And the desire was dead. The passion was dead. So here it says that he made an excuse to go without her. She easily perceived his coldness. The coldness regarding the physical proximity. The coldness regarding the passion. Or maybe the desire. And the reason why he pretended her going would be inconvenient. And endured as much from the discovery as any of her sex could do. So she could identify what had happened between them. She dissembled it, however, before him, and took her leave of him with a show of no other concern than his absence occasioned. So she was not disclosing her discomfitures. She told him about her absence, that's his absence, that is the absence of Beauplaisir, which actually tormented her. She described that. But this she did not take from him all suspicion of her following him. But ultimately she followed him as she intended and had already laid a scheme for. From her first meeting, out that he designed to leave her behind, she plainly saw it was for no other reason than that being tired of a conversation, he was willing to be at liberty to pursue new conquests. So it was a kind of an indication that she had noticed that ultimately the new conquests, you see, the new conquest that is actually referring to creating relations with the other women. Okay, the new conquests. And wisely considering that complaints, the sorrowful utterances, tears, soonings, and all the extravagances which women make use of in such cases. So these are the generalized observations you see. The terms that she's using here, Eliza Haywood is using here, that is the complaints, tears, sooning, extravagances, because you can find that so far as the typical 18th century novels are concerned, 18th century texts are concerned, you will find that when the ladies have been completely duped and dodged by her lovers, they feel the same. These are the typical or stereotypical description of the women in the 18th century texts. Now, here you will find that Phantomina is negating all these propositions. She is negating not only these words, rather Eliza Haywood is negating the typical portraiture of women as the male writers always portrayed by representing the characters to the society, obviously. Okay, so such kind of, a kind of opposition that have been made here. Here you will find that Phantomina will not shed tear. She will not be engaged in complaints. She will not be engaged in soonings or extravagances, which women make use of in such cases. They have little prevalence over a heart inclined to rove, and only serve to render those who practice them more contemptible by robbing them of that beauty which alone can bring back the fugitive lover. So that's why it actually happens. So here you will find that the choice that had been made by Phantomina here, it is not simply her choice. Rather, it is a kind of an alternative choice that had been shown by Eliza Haywood. So it was to some extent against the patriarchal notions of representing females. Right? Also, I have to tell you that somehow the end product of this text is patriarchal. The result of this text is patriarchal because Eliza Haywood also was a character to be controlled by patriarchy. She also had to show something, the punitive measures must have to be shown to Phantomina. But in the text, you will find that the choices that have been given to Phantomina, the choices that have been given to the lady, these are somehow, that can influence the readers in any kind of choices that they could make. So here it says, therefore, and only serve to render those who practice them more contemptible by robbing them of the beauty alone can bring back the quote-unquote fugitive lovers. She resolved to take another course, okay? And remembering the height of transport, that is the ecstasy, she enjoyed when the agreeable Beauplaisir knelt at her feet, imploring her first favors. She longed to prove or experience the same again. So this was the longing that was not completely lost from her. So what she did, she schemed, she plotted how that can be revived again. Okay, that was the alternative view, you see. That in a traditional way of traditional novels, you will find the females are completely lost, they're abandoned, they're broken. But here, you can find another choice that is made by Phantomina. She was preparing herself for another way of changing the temperament of this man. Okay? Because she was always, in love with that ecstatic moment, or those ecstatic moments when they were in close union. So that's why it says that Beauplaisir knelt at her feet, imploring her first favors. She longed to prove the same again. Not but a woman of her beauty and accomplishments might have beheld 1,000 in that condition Beauplaisir had been. But with that sex's modesty, there was a difference, yes, obviously. Why she was, completely thinking about Beauplaisir alone. She could have met any other personality. But it was her modesty that she was always thoughtful about the single man, you see. So, but with her sex's modesty, she had not also thrown off another virtue equally valuable, though generally unfortunate, that is, quote-unquote, constancy, that was continually present in her. But constancy is a term that cannot be used, that cannot be attached with the males, you see, that have been shown in the text. So, thrown off another virtue equally valuable, though generally unfortunate, that is constancy. She loved Beauplaisir. It was only he whose solicitations, that is entreaties, could give her pleasure. And had she seen the whole species despairing, dying for her sake, it might perhaps have been a satisfaction to her pride, but none to her more tender inclination. So it might be possible that she can encounter other male figures, but her inclination was also only to Beauplaisir. Her design was once more to engage him, to hear him sigh, to see him languish, to feel the strenuous pressures of his eager arms, to compel, to be sweetly forced to what she wished, with equal ardor, that is equal passion, was what she wanted, and what she had formed a stratagem, a scheme to obtain, in which she promised herself success. She no sooner heard he had left the town than, making a pretense to her aunt that she was going to visit a relation in the country, went towards Bath. Now she has to prepare for the situations. She has to mislead her aunt. She has to give in some false reasons to her aunt. And now she is, making another story. That she was going to visit a relation in the country, went towards Bath, attended but by 2 servants, who she found reasons to quarrel with on the road and discharged. Ultimately, she has to make rid of the servants also and discharge them, clothing herself in a habit she had brought with her. She forsook the coach they were going with, and went into a wagon wheel, you see, in which equipage she arrived at Bath. And, what is the reason behind them? We know everything. The dress she was in it is the arrival dressing at Bath, obviously. These are some important objective forms, you see. The dress she was in was a round-eared cap, a short red petticoat, and a little jacket of grey stuff. Okay, so these were the style which was usually associated with the country and often worn under a hat by women working outdoors. She was wearing them. Some women tied the skirt up on both sides to display their decorative or embroidered petticoats. But ultimately, that was the kind of a style that she was using at this moment. All the rest of her accoutrements, that is the additional items of dress, were answerable to these, and joined with a broad country dialect, a rude, unpolished air. You see that these are the matters of disguise. These are matters of different kind of identity that she is imposing upon her. The dress, the country dialect, the language, the behavior, the rude, unpolished air, the habits, you see, which she, having been bred in these parts, knew very well how to imitate. With her hair, eyebrows blacked, made it impossible for her to be known or taken for any other than what she seemed. Thus disguised, did she offer herself to service in the house where Beauplaisir lodged. So she was using the attire of a maidservant, you see. Having made it her business to find out immediately where he was. Notwithstanding this metamorphosis, the metamorphosis of the character of Mina, or the lady. Notwithstanding this, in spite of this metamorphosis, she was still extremely pretty. And the mistress of the house happening at the time to want a maid. Okay, so it was a kind of a need of the maid at this moment. Was very glad of the opportunity of taking her. She was presently received into the family and had a post in it, such as she would have choose had she been left at her liberty. That of making the gentlemen's beds, getting them their breakfasts, and waiting on them in their chambers. So these are the works that have been ascribed to her. Of making the gentlemen's beds, getting them their breakfasts, waiting on them in their chambers. Fortune in this exploit was extremely on her side. There were no others of the male sex in the house. So Eliza Haywood is also indicating that what are the focuses or what are the destinies of the maidservants. If there were the male members of the house, it might be any other kind of sexual impressions that have been posed upon them. But now, fortunately, there is no other male sex in the house. So such kind of danger is not lurking for her. There were no other of the male sex in the house than an old gentleman who had lost the use of his limbs. It is actually indicating the condition of the barmaids or condition of the maid servants in a typical household. She was raped, she was dominated, she was physically assaulted by the male members of the family. But here you will find that here is an old gentleman who had lost the use of his limbs with the rheumatism, that is arthritis, and had come thither for the benefit of the waters, and had beloved Beauplaisir, so that she was in no apprehensions of any amorous violence. But where she wished to find it, nor were her designs disappointed. So she was thinking about another kind of an encounter between them. But where she wished to find it, nor were her designs disappointed. He was fired with the first sight of her. And though he did not presently take any further notice of her than giving her 2 or 3 hearty kisses, yet she, who now understood that language but too well, she could identify what does it mean. The 2 kisses or 3 kisses, what does it mean? Easily saw they were the prelude to more substantial joys. So these are actually indicating Beauplaisir's craving towards the physical union. Coming the next morning to bring his chocolate, as he had ordered, he catched her by the pretty leg, which the shortness of her petticoat did not in the least oppose. She was not opposing. Then pulling her gently to him, asked her how long she had been at service, how many sweethearts she had, if she had ever been in love. So these were the questions, these are the petty questions, obviously. You'll find that Beauplaisir, actually these are the occasions that he is creating towards his adventure. How many sweethearts she had, if she had ever been in love, and many other such questions befitting one of the degree she appeared to be, all which she answered with such seeming innocence as more inflamed the amorous heart of him who talked to her. So she was assuming an innocent child as if. And these, each and every innocent remarks, it fired the anger, it fired the passion within him. He compelled her to sit in his lap, and gazing on her blushing beauties, which if possible received addition from her plain and rural dress, he soon lost the power of containing himself. His wild desires burst out in all his words and actions. He called her little angel, cherubim. So these are the names that are actually the outcome of the passions that he was being in. Swore he must enjoy her, though death were to be the consequence. Devoured her lips, her breasts with greedy kisses, held to his burning bosom her half-yielding, half-reluctant body, nor suffered her to get loose, till he had ravaged all, and glutted each rapacious sense, that is greedy sense, with the sweet beauties of the pretty Celia. So this is another assumed name that she is taking here. Celia. The first one is Mina. The second one is Celia, the Maidservant. For that was the name she bore in this second expedition. So it is kind of an expedition, you see. A kind of adventure, explorations, expeditions. Generous as liberality itself. To all who gave him joy this way, he gave her a handsome sum of gold. He was giving her the gold, right? He gave her a handsome sum of gold, which she durst not now refuse. Now she cannot refuse them. Why? Because she is the maidservant, and if she refuses this amount of gold, then it creates suspicion to Beauplaisir. So which she durst not now refuse, for fear of creating some mistrust and losing the heart she so lately had regained. Therefore, taking it with an humble courtesy and a well counterfeited shew of surprise and joy, cried, "O law, sir, what must I do for all this?" He laughed at her simplicity. So these are the assumed simplicity that she is creating. He laughed at her simplicity and kissing her again, though less fervently, it is less passionately, you see, than he had done before. Bade her not be out of the way when he came home at night. She promised she would not, and very obediently kept her word. So ultimately, it was an assumed role of Celia that she was, successful in such kind of encounter, such kind of physical proximity ultimately. So, that this particular kind of an interchange, or maybe this kind of physical approximation, it must not run long, you see. So for as Celia is concerned, because she is assuming the role of a maid servant here, so it cannot last long. Why? Because it is the general tendency of the typical 18th century society that if a person of a higher degree, he uses or to some extent gets mixed with or assimilated with any maid servant, then ultimately it will be for once. You cannot expect that this particular affair should go for long times. Somehow, this is the second disguise that she is creating. This is the second kind of assuming or assumed role that Celia, the maid, that she is using. What is the reason behind such kind of things? You can identify throughout the text. There are ample provisions of a desire, but ultimately she was completely fixed on one particular character, and that is Vivacity. And she was with the particular view that I must be attached with him at any cost. Okay, so this is fundamentally very important, and as I've already discussed, as I've already mentioned, that these are the things that can make you feel that what is the focus of Eliza Haywood by representing such kind of story, by presenting such kind of story, by presenting such kind of character, the lady. Okay, but the pattern of overt form of sexuality that it describes, the pattern of overt form of sexuality that it indicates, these are, the typical temperamental aspects of the females during this time. But somehow it is the societal obligatory rules and principles that actually kept them bird. Okay, and somehow these descriptions can create or stir the minds that have been completely duped, that have been completely or continuously, that have been controlled by the patriarchal rules and regulations. That's why the text, if we think of the text, you will find that the ways that have been shown by Eliza Haywood here, that have been made by the choices that have been made by Philomena, whether it is Philomena that she was assuming a role and continuously she was engaged in such kind of physical relations, such kind of relations that have been attached with him, or attached with her. These are indicating a kind of a choice that have been made by a lady who is from the upper strata of society. It will not be, or it would not be any kind of problem. It would not be remarkable if Philomena was not a representative of the upper strata of society. Somehow Eliza Haywood is focusing on Philomena as a representative of one upper strata of society, and somehow she is commenting on the actual temperament, the actual desires, the actual mindset that was present within these female characters, which was, I have already mentioned, that this particular psyche, the particular temperament, the particular mindset, these were continuously under the control of patriarchy. And this nature, or the way Philomena has been treated, the way Philomena has been shown, this was a kind of an indication towards the breaking of patriarchal regulations. That's why it was a kind of a threat against patriarchy. And somehow you will find that the differentiations between male sexuality and female sexuality, as I have discussed, as I mentioned before, these were somehow Eliza Haywood's attributions that she is making, and it was completely criticized by the patriarchal outfit, obviously. But toward the end, as I mentioned just now, that toward the end of this text, we will find that some punitive measures have been taken or will be taken against this woman, that is Philomena. Somehow that had to be discussed later. Okay, well, I will complete the text. I will obviously discuss on this particular episode, on the particular condition, on the particular obligation that Eliza Haywood also faced in this patriarchal society. So today, up to this, just go through the text, listen to the lectures carefully, and read the texts, point and mark the informations that you have found in the text, because these are very important for your objective questions and 5 marks question. The episodes are very important, the names and assuming rules, the situations she was in, these are somehow very important. Try to do that, and I will resume my next lecture on Philomena soon. Thank you.